My name is Alexa, and I never imagined that one ordinary morning would change my life forever. The sun was shining through my bedroom window as I packed my bag for work. I smiled at my reflection and whispered, "Today is going to be a good day." I had dreams, plans, and hope. I loved my job, my small apartment, and the simple life I had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Before leaving, I called my mother. "Take care of yourself," she said warmly. "I will. I'll visit this weekend," I replied. Those were the last peaceful words I heard that morning. When I arrived at work, everything felt different. My manager called me into the office. His face looked serious. "I'm sorry, Alexa," he said quietly. "Due to financial problems, we're letting several employees go today." I froze. "What does that mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. "It means today is your last day." The room became silent. My heart raced. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I packed my desk slowly, trying not to cry in front of everyone. Some coworkers hugged me. Others avoided eye contact because they didn't know what to say. As I walked outside carrying a small cardboard box with my belongings, dark clouds began to gather. My phone rang. It was my landlord. "Alexa, your rent is overdue. If you can't pay this week, you'll have to move out." I stood on the sidewalk, unable to speak. Within a single hour, I had lost my job and the place I called home. Tears rolled down my face as the first drops of rain began to fall. I looked up at the grey sky and whispered, "Why is this happening to me?" At that moment, I truly believed I had lost everything. The rain grew heavier as I stood on the sidewalk, holding the small cardboard box that now contained everything from my desk. Cars passed by without slowing down. People hurried home with umbrellas, while I remained frozen, wondering what to do next. I checked my bank account. The balance was barely enough to buy groceries for a few days. I sighed and whispered, "How did my life change so quickly?" I called a few friends, hoping someone might let me stay for a night. The first didn't answer. The second apologized. "I'm sorry, Alexa. My apartment is already full." The third simply said, "I wish I could help." One by one, every door seemed to close. As evening arrived, I sat alone on a park bench, watching the city lights appear one by one. The cold wind made me pull my jacket tighter around my shoulders. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I opened my bag and found a small sandwich I had packed that morning. It was all I had. As I was about to take a bite, I noticed an elderly man sitting nearby. He looked tired, hungry, and even colder than I was. For a moment I hesitated. Then I walked over and handed him the sandwich. "It's okay," I said with a gentle smile. "You need it more than I do." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "May kindness find its way back to you." His words stayed with me long after I walked away. That night, I found a small bench under a bus shelter where I could stay dry until morning. The future was uncertain, and fear filled my heart. But somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of hope refused to disappear. Maybe losing everything wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds singing. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then reality returned. I was still sitting on the bench at the bus stop, tired, cold, and unsure of what would happen next. I washed my face in a public restroom and tried to look presentable. No matter how broken I felt, I knew I couldn't stop searching for work. I walked from one business to another, asking if they were hiring. Every answer was the same. "I'm sorry. We're not hiring. Please leave your resume." With every rejection, my confidence faded a little more. By late afternoon, my feet ached, and I was ready to give up. I sat on another bench and quietly wiped away my tears. Just then, I heard a familiar voice. "Alexa?" I looked up and saw the elderly man I had shared my sandwich with the night before. He smiled warmly. "I've been hoping to see you again," he said. "You remembered me?" I asked. "Kindness is something I never forget." He reached into his worn backpack and handed me a folded piece of paper. "My daughter owns a small neighborhood cafe," he explained. "She's looking for someone honest and hardworking. I told her about you." I stared at the paper. It had the cafe's name, address, and a note that read, "Please give Alexa a chance." Tears filled my eyes once again. "But you barely know me," I whispered. The old man smiled gently. "I know enough. A person who shares their last meal with a stranger has a good heart." For the first time since losing everything, I felt a small spark of hope grow brighter. Maybe life hadn't forgotten me after all. Holding the note tightly in my hands, I took a deep breath and started walking toward the cafe. I had no idea that opening its door would change my life forever. My hands trembled as I stood outside the small neighborhood cafe. The note from the elderly man was still safely tucked inside my pocket. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. The warm smell of fresh coffee and homemade bread filled the air. Soft music played in the background, making the cafe feel peaceful. A woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "You must be Alexa," she said. I was surprised. "Yes. How did you know?" "My father called me this morning," she replied. "He told me about the sandwich you shared with him." I looked down, feeling embarrassed. "It wasn't much." She smiled gently. To someone who was hungry, it meant everything. She introduced herself as Emma, the owner of the cafe. Instead of asking about my mistakes or why I had lost my job, she asked only one question. "Are you willing to work hard?" Without hesitation, I answered, "Yes." Emma handed me an apron. "Then welcome to our team." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." Over the next few weeks, I learned how to prepare coffee, serve customers, and keep the cafe running smoothly. The work was not easy, but every day I arrived early with gratitude in my heart. Customers began to recognize my smile, and many returned because they felt welcome. One evening, Emma handed me my first paycheck. "You've earned every dollar," she said proudly. Holding that envelope, I realized something important. I had lost my old job. I had almost lost my home. But I had not lost my kindness, my determination, or my hope. Those were the things that helped me begin again. And they were worth more than anything money could buy. 6 months passed faster than I could imagine. The little cafe had become more than just a workplace. It had become my second home. I had saved enough money to rent a small apartment again. It wasn't luxurious, but every corner reminded me how far I had come. One afternoon, as I was serving customers, the cafe door opened. I looked up and froze. It was my former manager. He smiled awkwardly. "Alexa, it's good to see you." I smiled back, without anger or bitterness. "We've reopened the company," he explained. "We're hiring again, and we'd like to offer you your old position." For a moment, I remembered the painful day I carried my cardboard box out of the office, believing my life was over. Then I looked around the cafe. I saw Emma greeting customers with her warm smile. I saw the elderly man sitting in his favorite corner, enjoying his afternoon tea. I saw people laughing, talking, and feeling at home. This place had given me hope when I had none. I took a deep breath. "Thank you for the offer," I said kindly. "But I've already found where I belong." My former manager nodded with respect. "I understand. I'm happy you've found happiness." As he left, I smiled. That evening, I watched the sunset from outside the cafe. Months earlier, I had stood in the rain, believing I had lost everything. Now I understood the truth. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost the life that was no longer meant for me. By letting go, I found new friends, a new purpose, and a new beginning. Sometimes life closes one door so that we have the courage to walk through a better one. And that was the day I realized. Losing everything was actually the first step toward finding myself.